Hey guys, Luton here, back with some more Below the Line. This is my new series idea where I will look at comments that you guys have posted on my videos since the last video of Below the Line, and we'll talk a little bit about those constructive ideas people have put forward, the well-made points that people have made. And they don't have to necessarily agree with me, they just have to be well-made points that have, a good opinion. And the last times Below the Line went down really well, people liked the idea, and you guys had some good feedback from me in terms of saying like, hey, let's not just have 3 comments each time, it doesn't have to be set, it can be, just depending on what people have said. And also I think my schedule is not set in stone with, amount of videos I turn out each week. And so I think, producing this bi-weekly is a good idea. So doing twice a month gives a good amount of time for me to put out other videos and you guys to make comments. So let's go into the first one. And that's from Broken Silence, talking about the Division beta. And he says that in the beginning, when I thought it was a survival DayZ style game, I was completely turned off. DayZ style games are disinteresting to me. Now the beta is out, I can see more of the gameplay of the Division. I'm much more interested. The RPG like bullet-based combat system is actually pleasing to me, after wanting to find a game like Stalker, but multiplayer. Now many of you may not remember Stalker, but Stalker was a fantastic game set in the wastelands of Chernobyl. It's a very kind of RPG FPS, and there's a new game coming out soon. What was it? Tarkov, Escape from Tarkov, and it looks very similar to Stalker actually, but just kind of very updated. In Stalker, you have very bullet sponge enemies that made the game fun and challenging, especially after you just emptied a mag and you might have missed your shots because you're drunk and have to jump around, pull out your secondary so you can finish them off. People need to understand that developers do not need to cater to them before a purchase has been made. Instead, I love the fact they're doing something new with a bullet-based RPG combat system. Good on you, Ubisoft. Downgrade that game's graphics so my PC can run it. I think he's taking the piss there a little bit. He made something completely original and interesting for a different kind of player base. Artistic freedom is not dead, and this, on a gameplay perspective, is a good thing. There's a lot of opinions around the Division and how it's working in terms of the bullet sponging system. I've already spoken about this on several videos, so I'm not going to go into it in a really long way. But I think there are some arguments to be made, and that actually goes straight into our next comment as well. But thinking back to what he's talking about Stalker there, there are other games which have sort of bullet-based RPG style systems, and they do work. But I do think it's good that they have wanted to try and do something else. It would have been very easy actually for Ubisoft and the devs to actually just say, hey, we're going to go down that kind of survivalist route, we're going to go down that style. A lot of games do that now, so maybe it is a good thing that they're actually heading in a different direction, Okay, next we've got a comment from Abakri Rivich. I think I probably slaughtered that name, but it's actually 2 posts from him and another one from Almost Bob. They had like a little reply conversation. I thought it worked very well. He says, when I had my hands on the closed beta for the game, I was pretty much playing with little knowledge as to what it was to be. I didn't really pay attention to the hype or news concerning it. I had a reasonably enjoyable time going through what it offered, but it seemed to me what they provided in that build was very little compared to what could have been tested. I think that's debatable. It depends entirely on what it is they're trying to personally get out of it, and they obviously don't want to show off too much. He says that left me off with a bit of a worried attitude toward the game's overall longevity. Mechanically, the bullet sponge mobs aren't breaking the game. Thematically, the bullet sponge mobs are quite immersion breaking. I do kind of agree with that. Seeing Cloth Hood block quite a few military-grade weapon rounds becomes more of a nagging annoyance and disinterest in the guns and theme. It's an enjoyable game with an identity crisis between the theme and gameplay mechanics, not to mention a currently unclear future in the representation of everything that it has to offer in the final product. That's just my current thoughts on the game. I'll be trying it out again in the public beta, which we obviously have right now. Hopefully then I can see the problems observed or be alleviated more by then. And if not, I'll just keep playing XCOM 2. It's not the end of the world if I pass up another big name game from a AAA production. But then Almost Bob comes in and he says that I definitely agree with your immersion point. It bugs me how a dude in a hoodie can soak up more rounds than a guy wearing level 3 body armor. It completely breaks the feeling of the game in my mind, given that the original trailers there was no indication that it was meant to be an RPG style damage model. I think that's actually debatable, but anyway, I think a hardcore mode would be a good way to fix this issue by making everything in the game use more realistic. Abakri comes back and says, a way I see them fixing this issue is to update the enemy models to scale up as the health and damage does for them also. I think it kind of does do that actually, but for a city that's filled to the brim with military weaponry laying around everywhere, I think it'd be more reasonable for the more powerful independent factions to have access to bulletproof vests and combat armor. So we'd have the hoodie guys dancing around with no cover, They look ridiculous when they're moving around in shooting, being the low-level mobs, no armor with small arms fire, while in the later game we'll see heavily armored enemies with military brand weapons and armor that they scavenged or jury-rigged. If they would do this to the game, then they'd see the immersion not be so fragmented as it currently is. I also think it'd be unfair of them to have the mobs get extra abilities such as special traits, and the difficulty goes up rather than just being able to soak up more damage while dealing more. It'd be more like how Killing Floor 2 does it, where the Zeds get very unique and dangerous abilities rather than just becoming bullet sponges as they were in the first game. Really, it makes just fighting harder enemies more fun than tedious. So mainly here what we're talking about is just the kind of the action we're going to see in the Division and the bullet sponging issue. Now I have spoken about this already, as I said. I think it's just important for people to try and remember that you can't have things like a hardcore mode. You can't change the game now from what it is, because if you were to change it, a hardcore mode doesn't make any sense in an MMO game because everyone is all playing together. You're supposed to be on the level. You can't choose to go into a hardcore area or something like that. It just doesn't work. It just doesn't make sense. That's not how it plays. So that wouldn't work. The other thing is that when it comes to the bullet sponging and stuff, now we've seen in the open beta now, by going down and seeing some of the cleaners, those guys, they do have more armor. You know, they have big suits on, they have packs, they have bits of armor strapped to them. So I think as you go along, you know, you may see more of these kind of factions. But something that is an issue for me is actually, like I've said before, the kind of longevity of the game and how complicated things are going to be. Now, something that has occurred to me as I have been playing is that you can kind of move around tactically, you can kind of work with your guys, but it's not like other MMO games that I have played where you do raids and stuff, because when in those kind of things the enemies usually have some kind of pattern or some kind of actions. Now when it comes to an FPS, that's a little bit more limited. It's not so fantasy based anyway. It's not so creative. So you'd have to significantly suspend your disbelief if there was some kind of very creative action that a boss would take. Similarly, I suppose, you know, you could have various pieces of armor and stuff. But again, within the grounding of reality, you know, how far are you going to push that? Are we going to see kind of crazy enemies like you might see in something like Mad Max? You know, from looking at the game, it all seems fairly kind of, they're trying to base it, or they're trying to kind of keep it fairly grounded. You know, they want it. I don't want to say realism, but they want to keep it fairly grounded. They don't want, like, you know, enemies walking around in like giant mech suits and stuff like this. So, you know, to expect those bosses to scale up or work in a different way in order to make them more understandably difficult to take down, or require some kind of, you know, special process as a team to take them out, I'm not entirely sure how they're going to get to that point. I look forward to them, you know, showing us when they release the game and presenting it, and we can find out for ourselves, you know, how they have decided to do that. But personally, putting it into a kind of shooter like this, I feel is quite a difficult thing to do. But the guys made some good points about, you know, the RPG style and the shooting system and so on and so on. But ultimately, you know, as I've said before, I think it's quite debatable that there was no sign of this in the past, and I also don't think that this game necessarily would suit a kind of more hardcore shooting style. One thing that I do feel, and I have thought about more and more, and I probably will talk about this fleshed out a bit more in another video, is I'm starting to feel like I don't really feel that this game is necessary to be an MMO. But I mean, on the other hand, it's kind of, you know how sometimes you can have a multiplayer area, and you can have like a multiplayer aspect to a single player game. So you could imagine if this game was just PvE only and it was campaign based, but then you have a multiplayer tacked onto that. Sometimes that can be difficult to kind of, you know, encourage people to get into, because it's a bit, you know, it's separated from the main stuff. I think this game would suit just being a co-op PvE experience very well, where it's almost kind of, you know, required that you play it as a co-op experience rather than necessarily doing it as single, or maybe, you know, just scaling difficulty there. You know, it's a bit easier with friends, or you just have more options, or the enemies scale up and so on and so on. There's a few different interesting ways they could have gone with it, but I'm still not super convinced by the multiplayer aspect. But it's going to be interesting to see how it goes. I think there are a lot of unknowns with the Division right now, and I think that's why there are so many conflicting opinions about it. I think until the game releases, really, we're not going to get most of the answers that people are really looking for. Answers like, you know, how are they going to kind of engage the player with that sort of longer term content? How exactly are the raids going to function in terms of, you know, not being just repetitive, not just being like, there's the guy, let's lay down a load of fire on him and make sure our gear is scaled up enough that we can take him out. So we'll just have to see how it works, but we've been having a lot of good feedback about the game, and personally I've been enjoying it a lot so far. I really am looking forward to it. Okay, another Division comment now, and it's from Roman Cat Matt, a long-time subscriber of the channel. I have my reservations regarding the Division, and will the content be enough to keep people interested into the future? Yes, the game is addicting, very much like WoW and Destiny. I think the main focus will be loot gathering, as this is what draws people back to these type of games. It is, and that's actually something that really concerns me, because I don't want to get dragged into that kind of loot upgrade fest. It's happened to me before and I get sucked in really, really hard. I don't want that to happen to me this time. The average player isn't going to care about killing the big boss missions, as they don't have access to the resources or people to complete them. My concerns for the Dark Zone is how are the connections going to be handled, as I run across a lot of people from around the world, England, US, China, and trying to find someone on a 300 to 400 ping will be a nightmare. Just remember, us Aussies are normal, friendly, and always willing to help out. You know, I kind of feel like I want to do a discussion about Australian gamers at some point, because I always feel like Aussies get screwed when it comes to servers and just kind of ping and having to deal with this kind of stuff, and not to mention the fact that the Australian kind of internet infrastructure, from what I understand, can be a pretty bad thing, very akin to how it can be in the US. Actually, it can be a bit of a nightmare, and I think there's various reasons for that, but anyway, yeah, it kind of sucks, and I really feel for those guys over there, so I wish that things were a bit better. And also I wish that, you know, at this day and age, you know, at this state, 2016, I wish I could connect here in the UK to someone in Australia without having an insane ping. Now, to be fair, when you think about it, when you literally think about what is happening right there, it is a massive, massive, massive distance. I mean, when you think back, I mean, we're kind of going a bit off topic here, but when you think back to, you know, a long time ago, when people couldn't even make a phone call to, you know, other countries, let alone the complete other side of the planet, it is pretty insane that you can kind of get two people together at that distance, playing together in a game like this and working together. So it's pretty astonishing. But, you know, technology has come on a long way, and I really would hope that we could sort of play without those kind of crazy pings and lags together, or at least be making some forward progress on it, because it really doesn't feel like any progress has been made in the last, like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years on these kind of things. And it would just be cool. It just gives you more opportunities. You know, there's a lot of, you know, I have met and encountered, you know, various Australian players. You know, hey, I've got some family in Australia. I know Australians in London as well. You know, lovely, you know, they're great guys, great people to play with, and I would love to be able to play with people from Australia. You know, I would love it. I want to be able to play with people from Australia in the same way that I can play with people from the US. But unfortunately, the time is always going to be a factor. Okay, the time zones are going to be a factor, but also, yeah, just that ping, it just sucks, and it sucks for them trying to play, and it sucks for other people trying to play with them. So I really hope technology moves forward and we get some progress on those kind of things, because it really sucks and just frustrating for everybody involved. Okay, last comment today, guys, and this one's from eBunny, and this was on my Overwatch video, which actually came out today. This is one FPS game that has been very appealing to me from the start, and has only been getting more and more appealing as time went on. It's right up my alley, from the charming art style and aesthetics to the way the game handles progression and how the developers are approaching things, like the fact that it's pay to play rather than free to play. They're just ticking all the right boxes and doing everything right for me. It's probably the only FPS I'm interested in right now besides Squad and maybe some other indie games, which is kind of funny since they're pretty different kinds of game. But I'm definitely looking forward to playing it. I do hope they will approach the DLC well and don't make new characters, if they're going to be any, purchasable, for example, since I think that would be detrimental for the game. I think what he was trying to say there is he hopes he doesn't make game characters, you know, basically purchasable with microtransactions, etc., which I kind of agree with. But so far, I'm fairly positive when it comes to this game, and it'd be nice to see more content from you on it as well. Well, yeah, I will say that I'm massively looking forward to Overwatch. I spoke about this a bit already on the video today, but I think it really is doing a lot of things right. And there were loads and loads of positive comments on there, but I'm going to be sort of getting into that a little bit more. I want to talk about some of the characters and how you can kind of best utilize them well. We'll start thinking about team tactics and stuff. And again, it's something I've had experience with in the past, but you know, you need to kind of get some time with the game. I need to get some time with my squad in the game and really get to grips with that side of things. But Overwatch, it just looks super fun, and I think something that I saw a lot of people saying today is that it's one of those games where you really have a hard time judging it unless you've had hands-on with it. You know, I have said in the past that I think some games you really can judge without playing them. I know many people may disagree with that, but I think some games you can look at gameplay and you can kind of be like, okay, I have played games like this before, I understand kind of what it's about, I know what's going on here. You can make a reasonably informed assessment based off of gameplay sometimes. But Overwatch is one of those games that the gameplay itself really doesn't emphasize, it really doesn't kind of give you the insight you need when it comes to how that game actually plays. And I can tell you that for a fact because that was me. You know, I was fairly cynical, a bit judgmental. I wasn't sure what to feel. I was excited for the game because I was very hopeful that it'd be something interesting and you know, something I wanted to play. But until I actually got hands-on with it, and even for the first week where I was actually having some gameplay with it, I still wasn't super convinced. In fact, it took me maybe 3 or 4 days, you know, several nights of playing the game before it really started to kind of flesh out and dawn on me just, you know, what was enjoyable about the game. And I think, you know, having a few bad rounds and then going to good rounds after and sort of fighting some people that actually did want to work together with me really made all the difference there. But also, it's one of those games where there is a learning curve in terms of just having understanding and knowledge about the heroes in the game and what they can do and what you can do. And until you have some of that knowledge in there, you don't really play the game properly and you don't really sort of make the kind of decisions you need to there. It's a very interesting game, and you know, I think, as I say, it's like many things, right? It's simple on face value, but when you look beneath the surface and you actually spend some time with it, it's not at all what you might imagine. I also said today that it reminds me very much of Time Splitters, and anybody who played sort of Time Splitters back in the day will remember that that game was just extreme fun. You know, it's just, you know, a bit cartoony but very, very skill based, and that's kind of what Overwatch feels like to me. You know, it's got a facade, but the facade doesn't represent the actual experience that you have. So can't wait to get some more gameplay with it. So that was Below the Line for this week, guys. Thanks for all your comments this week, and thanks for continuing to support me and the videos and the channel and everything. Please tell me what you thought about the videos that we posted this week and the kind of content you want to see more and more of, and also reply back to the guys' comments on here down below with your own thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time for some more Below the Line.